My name is Sandra Boyd, and I decided to come and be a part of this documentary because in 2002 I had a near-death experience, and afterwards I had absolutely no one to talk to and had a very hard time figuring out in the beginning what had happened to me. And I feel that if there are other people out there, which I'm pretty sure there are, that are in the situation I was in, they could see this and it would help them.
That was excellent. Okay, so then if you could just think back to before you had a near-death experience in that day, or maybe the 1 or 2 days beforehand, how you were feeling, what was going on in your life.
Sure. A couple days prior to my near-death experience, I had been sick for about 3 months. I had some kind of a cold and then bronchitis and then just lung infections that wouldn't go away, and hadn't really gone to the doctors to get it taken care of. And I woke up in the morning and had this feeling like I was dying, and stayed in bed. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I took off all my jewelry and I went out to the living room and said to my daughter's father at the time, "I think I'm dying and you need to take me to the emergency room." And so we jumped in the car and raced to the emergency room. And the next thing I basically remember is sitting in a room with the doctors asking me why I waited so long, and then I started to drown in my own fluids. So my lungs were filling up while the doctors actually hadn't even had a chance to get everything they needed to intubate me. And so as they were screaming and yelling that the ship is sinking, I remember looking down, and then I remember thinking, I'm actually looking down at the doctors working on me. And at that moment, I realized it was 5:30. I had looked at the clock and that I was out of my body, and no longer was I in any pain, and actually saw the devastational look on everybody's face, but I was feeling really good.
Okay, can we back up a little bit and go to in the car? Do you remember, if you could put your, like, if you have to close your eyes for a moment and think about how you felt in the car. I don't mean to traumatize you, but I really want to get into the moment. If you can just think about that when you're on your way. Did you drove yourself then?
No, my daughter's father drove me, and I was unable to really breathe. So the whole time going to the hospital, it was just a matter of trying to stay alive to make it, because I knew that something was horribly wrong, and I truly felt like I was dying. So I was scared, thinking about my daughter, what was going to happen with my daughter, who was only 4 years old. And I then just kept focusing on trying to breathe. I'm trying to picture pulling up to the hospital, but a lot of that is kind of a blur. I remember pulling up to the hospital, and the next thing I remember actually is standing there telling the woman at the counter that I'm dying. So there's missing moments. You know, I don't think I waited, because I think they took my blood pressure and realized that there was a huge problem.
And then they brought you.
They just raced me into one of the rooms where a bunch of doctors started running in. So if I remember correctly, there were like 3 doctors and a couple of nurses, and they were all frantic, racing around, trying to, the one doctor, the pulmonary specialist, he was taking different tubes and putting them down my throat, because I guess he couldn't find a good fit. So I remember one being flown back over his shoulder, and I saw this from above. Another doctor was yelling at him that he needed to hurry because the ship was sinking. And so I remember thinking, that's interesting. I'm not a ship. I'm a person, but
Was your husband at the time there?
Yes, he wasn't my husband, but he was there, and he was standing under the clock, and they were so frantic trying to work on me that no one had asked him to leave. And so when I popped out of my body, I remember looking at him and then looking at the clock. That's how I remember that it was 5:30 when I died. Well, I remember that they were all very frantic, and Kevin looked like he was going to pass out, but I just remember feeling really good, and actually I felt like I was smiling. So I believe that I knew that I was getting ready to go home.
One more question about that moment. When you saw your body, what did your body look like, if you can describe it in detail?
My body looked like my body now. I looked just like this, but I was laying back. I had my eyes closed, and there were doctors all over me and tubes going into my mouth and in my nose, and they were putting lines into my arm, into my neck. But I just looked like I was sleeping. Okay, so when I was out of my body, and I noticed that it was 5:30, and I was listening and watching the doctors work on me. I also realized that at that time, I had so much knowledge that I actually knew that there was a gentleman in a room next to me who was also dying, and his soul left his body and went where we were going. We did not travel together. I just was aware of it. But the interesting thing is, for me, is I was aware that he was passing on and that he was going to stay passed on.
Did you visually see him also in his room, or you just were aware of it?
I visually saw him in his room in my mind. I could see him. I knew what he looked like on this earth, and then I also knew what he looked like in soul form. After focusing on the gentleman in the next room, I then just started raising up. I went through the hospital. I did not see a light. I did not go through a tunnel. I actually went through the top of the hospital, and I could see Earth. I could see everything. I could see the lights. I could see buildings. I could see houses. And it was almost like I took my attention somewhere else, and I was, to the best way that I could describe it, I was home. So I was standing, floating, I don't know what you want to call it. I want to say I was standing, but I doubt that I was standing in front of what looked to be a playground. And I saw all these children, and they were playing, some kind of a schoolyard game. And you could hear all the kids screaming and laughing, and as I looked at them, I realized that they were changing from the way that they looked here on Earth to these little soul lights. They were just buzzing around, and as I looked at them and they looked back at me, I knew what their name was and what they had died from. And I just was there smiling, and I felt so good, and you just could feel all this love and acceptance, and they were so happy. Nobody was saying, oh, I died down on Earth and now I'm here. It was just like, we're all home and we're playing and we're having this great time. And at that moment, I felt this, it almost felt like a hand on my shoulder, and everything stopped. I focused my attention to that hand, and what I got was, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. You need to come with me. So I left that area and was directed to go to, I think at that point, to my board. But on my way, I was shown a room that had a soul in it. And the room was filled with really beautiful golden light, and it was filled with nothing but this love that we don't feel here on earth. It's an all accepting, all beautiful. And my impression was this soul was kind of sitting, and he was kind of slouched over, and what I was shown was that he had done really bad things on earth, and his soul was being conditioned and given love, and they were trying to help him to get through what he had done down here.
Do you have any sense of why you were shown that? I mean, why you were able to see that?
You know, I've thought about that question many of times, because why would I be shown something like that? I think that I was shown that so I could help. When you're here on earth, people are always wondering, why are we here? What is our purpose? And you hear different people say, well, we're supposed to love each other. And that truly is the case, but it's a type of love that we humans don't really experience all that often. And I personally believe, after seeing what I saw in my near-death experience, that when we die, we don't go to hell. We kind of live in hell. And when we die, we aren't judged by others, and that I need to be more accepting and loving towards other people also. So I think that I was shown that so I could get an idea of what that real unconditional love is.
What happened after that?
After that, after seeing him, and my impression is it was a him, because it wasn't a man really sitting there, it was a soul who was there. And my impression was that this soul was a male soul. I turned my attention to where I was really supposed to be going, which was to my board. So my board was made up of 3 souls. One soul felt really tall and was very, the word I'm looking for, he was a very experienced soul. And then 2 souls, one on each side of the middle soul, who were talking to me about my life here on earth. And I get the sense that I was slamming my hand on the table. It was a very business meeting, and it was talking about me coming back. And at that point, I was feeling like I didn't want to come back. And so they were showing me things that I had done in life and things that were still left for me to do. And one of the biggest things for me to do was to be here for my daughter, who at the time was only 4. So after having this conversation with my board that takes place in your brain, because you don't sit and talk back and forth with them, I was then slammed back in my body.
I know this is going to be really hard, but can you try to describe visually what it was like backing up to when you came in with your board? What did they look like? I mean, it's I know it's very difficult.
Trying to describe what it's like on the other side here is very difficult because there aren't a lot of words that we humans use for what happens over there. But I can tell you that my brain probably picked things up and tried to say, what is the closest thing I know to what is happening? What am I seeing? So I can tell you that I feel like I saw this really, really pretty table. It was like a board, you know, it was like made out of wood, and it was very, I've never really described it. It was very pretty. The woods in it were different colors. There were light woods, there were like cherry woods, but it was all made out of wood. And I stood on one side and they stood on the other side. And the one in the middle was, my sense was very old and very wise. And the two that stood on each side were younger and in training. So they didn't do a lot of talking to me, but they agreed with what was being said to me.
You just mentioned earlier that they look like beings of light.
Yes.
So
My experience went back and forth. I saw what we look like in soul form, but I also saw what we look like here.
why do you think that is? Do you have an opinion?
Well, I think I saw it that way because I was comfortable, and that is the way that it is. On the other side, we don't look like this,
Right.
but I still carried a lot of my consciousness from being a human there, so I was able to recognize them as the humans that they were, whether they were little kids or an older man or whatever.
In that moment, did you still feel the all-encompassing
Love. Yeah, that's why there was such a fight at the board, because I wasn't going to come back. I wasn't going to come back and do life. Life is hard. Life can be really tough. We don't have the kind of love here on earth that we have over there. And I just wanted to stay home. I was home. I knew it was home. No doubt about I went home. And so I was actually felt like I was being asked to leave home. I was being kicked out of my home to come back here. Now, I have been told, and in some cases, looking back now, because it has been about 10 years for me, that we choose to come back. But when I first came back, it was very difficult for me because I felt forced.
Can you think of any other sensations that you felt while you were there? 'Cause
My experience was when I was out of body and I was on the other side, I did know. I was connected. So, you know, I felt like I knew everything. I didn't come back remembering everything, but I did know everything. And I did feel a type of love that I've never experienced before here on earth.
there's one other thing that I think that you mentioned to me and a lot of people say, is that when they're on the other side, it's actually like more real.
Right. No, you know, for me, and I've heard a lot of different experiences. I've talked to a lot of different people who have had experiences, and everybody who has an experience has their own experience. I can tell you that for me, I didn't see a lot of colors. I didn't see flowers. I didn't see butterflies. I saw children playing at a playground, and it looked to me like a playground that we have here. I saw, you know, someone sitting in a room that probably in my brain I could have thought was like a hospital because he was being healed. And the color of the golden light is something that we don't have here. And the feelings that I felt are the feelings we don't have here. But as far as, spectacular lighting or, colors, I didn't see that. I had in my mind almost a very business type of experience.
Number 2. All right. Surviving death, scene 2, take 2.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So I just wanted to go back and talk a little bit about the first thing that I noticed when I popped out of my body. The first thing I noticed when I popped out of my body was the sound that my soul makes. And I know that a lot of people refer to the sound our soul makes as music, but for me, it reminds me of a buzzing. And so we all actually, our souls all vibrate at a little different level. And it, to me, is a buzzing noise. And I remember just being with it and hearing myself buzzing. And I think I was becoming familiar again with myself after being in this shell for so long. And also, when I was at the playground watching the children, I could hear them laughing and screaming, but I also could hear the vibration, the buzzing noise that each of them made, that their souls made. And just think that that's really important because it's almost like words for us here, or a recognition. I know what you look like. There, I know what you sound like. And together we all vibrate and make this noise. I guess some people refer to it as music. For me, it's just a vibrational level.
Did you notice a vibrational sound when you went into the board?
Yes. But when I went in front of the board, it was very business. And so there wasn't any time to just sit there and just feel the love for each other. It was me sure that I was going to stay on the other side, and I think they were sure that they were going to show me why it was so important for me to come back.
Speed.
Surviving death, scene 3, take 1.
Okay. So now you just arrived back in your body.
Okay. So I felt like I was slammed back into my body, and it felt like the shell wasn't actually big enough to house me, because in my soul form I felt very big. And I remember actually waking up and trying to breathe, but I was on life support, and so I could hear nurses yelling at me, telling me to stop. I think they were telling me to stop because I was flailing and I was trying to pull the machine out of my mouth, and later learned, I didn't know at this time, but later I learned they had to keep inducing me into a coma. So they give you this medicine that is, they said it's white, and they call it milk of amnesia, because it's supposed to keep you sedated deep enough for the machines to do your breathing, and then you would not remember anything. However, the medicines that they were giving me, the mix was off, and so there were times when I was very awake, but all I was a brain. And I just remember laying there thinking, what did I do that was so bad?
Surviving death, scene 3, take 2.
The date of my near-death experience was May 18th, 2002. And in the hospital, after I had come out of the coma and my family was coming in to visit me, I asked one of them why they were so upset, and they said that the doctors told them that I wasn't going to live, that they only gave me a 10% chance to live, and that they had asked the family to call in somebody from the church to pray over me. And so the doctors told me themselves that they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They didn't know what medicines to give me, and that they felt my body almost healed itself, and that there wasn't any signs of the sickness that I had gone in there with coming out. And then they let me go home.
So then we're going to talk about, we covered a little bit about when you first went home, but to get in the flow, let's just go
Sure.
right back into that.
When I first got home, I was just happy to be home. But then the reality of what had happened to me set in, and that I was trying to be who I was before the coma, and it was very obvious to myself that I was no longer that person, that my belief system had changed, and that my interactions with certain family members and just the public in general wasn't the same. And I was having a very tough time trying to figure out how to get my rhythm back. I was doing life just fine. I was working. I had all these relationships. I had friendships. I did what I did. And now I was like this totally different person with this whole new belief system. And some of those people I couldn't even connect with anymore. I couldn't even relate to them, and found it very difficult to be around them. And my core person wasn't the same, and knew I needed to make a lot of changes. So after being home and getting back on my feet after about 3, 4, 5 months, I went back to work. And soon after going back to work, I actually ended my relationship that I was in with my daughter's father. And I took my 4-year-old and we moved out onto our own. And just day by day, I just took it day by day and tried to get a rhythm for life again. But it was really difficult because not being able to relate to a lot of the people that I related to before, and I had all this knowledge and memory of these experiences, and I tried to talk to a couple people, and it didn't go well. People were shutting me up. They weren't able to handle it. They said, oh, it's your imagination. But I knew for sure that what I had went through wasn't my imagination. I didn't know at the time that I had a near-death experience. It wasn't until about 7 months after my near-death experience, I had a call from a friend of mine who said, I didn't realize that you had been so sick and you were in the hospital. Let's talk. And I said, no, I don't talk about that part of my life. And he said, why? And I said, because it doesn't seem to be accepted by people, and I don't feel comfortable sharing it anymore.